So let me just revise what we discussed yesterday. So yesterday we discussed that what are the topics we are going to discuss in our course. So I repeated twice. Now after that we discuss also we are discussing this Linux administration course. Why? Because most of the servers in the world are working on Linux. So first of all, we discuss what is Linux. Linux is an open source operating system. So this open source Linux operating system is designed using the Unix. So Linux operating system is designed using the Unix. So what is Unix? Using is also operating system, but Unix is an operating system. So Linux is designed using the Unix. So what is Unix? Unix is also an operating system which is designed by AT&T under Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie. So the advantage of Unix, it was completely very secure, but it used to work only in the command base, no graphical interface. And the another main disadvantage in the Unix was it was a property based or hardware dependent OS. So like we discussed the example, Solaris can be installed on Sun machine, AIX can be installed on IBM machine, HPUX can be installed on HP machine. So if you want to change the OS, you have to change the Unix OS, means you have to change the hardware, which is an expensive affair. Then the Windows was introduced by Bill Gates with what? This feature, hardware independent, so that Windows OS can be installed on any machine. It doesn't require any specific hardware which was required in the Unix. Then most of the people were started using the Unix in place of Unix only Windows. So literally Unix was dying. So to revive the Unix and to give the people freedom from the license issue, because license key very frequently the Windows people were raising because there was no competition for them. So this gentleman Linus Torvald designed one new OS which is called Linux OS, and whatever coding or program he has written to design this Linux kernel, which is called the source code of the Linux kernel, which is designed by Linus Torvald, is he put it over the internet, which anybody can access and modify. So because of that reason, Linux is called open source. Due to this reason, in Linux we have so many flavors. So out of that, which flavor we are going to discuss? Red Hat. Yes. So in the Red Hat, the version is RHL 7. So that we are going to discuss with CentOS 7. So yesterday I told you the difference between CentOS and Red Hat. Everything is in between them. For Red Hat, they are charging to provide support, but in CentOS it is completely free but no support. So since we are using this OS, since this OS we are using for training purpose, so we'll be using the CentOS 7 in place of RHL 7. Now coming to the structure or the design of the Linux OS. So why the most of the companies are using the Linux? Why the people or companies are using the Linux? So for that, what you have to remember is that the Linux operating system structure is very good, or it's very secure. So every operating system consists of what? Kernel. So the complete operating system of the Linux operating system is logically divided into two layers. First layer is the shell, and the second layer of the Linux operating system is Linux kernel. So in the other operating system you don't have the shell. In Linux you have. So now suppose some applications are there which a user is accessing. So if you want to use any command in Windows, you have to go to the command prompt. In Linux we have to open the shell. So now this shell is designed in such a way that whenever you are writing any command, so the shell will check whether that command is given properly or not. So this is the extra layer of this security you have in Linux. And apart from that, in Linux, all the files will be with non-executable. All the files will be in non-executable format. So this makes Linux very secure. Apart from that, the structure of the Linux OS, the Linux OS can be installed on multiple partitions, which you cannot do on Windows. So this makes Linux very unique as well as very secure. That is the reason most of the companies servers in the world are working on Linux. Now we'll try to understand what is shell, what the Linux kernel will do. So the structure of the Linux operating system is divided into two layers. So the first layer of the Linux operating system program is called shell, and the second and most important layer of the Linux operating system is called Linux kernel. So this is the structure of the Linux OS. Now, so in the Linux, we have shell, which is not there in the Windows. So what is the role of the shell? So shell is the interface between the user and the kernel. So when we are using any command, so whatever command we have given, whether that command we have given is correctly or not, who will check it? Shell will check. So these shells are being designed by the developer using what? C language. So the shell identify. So what is the role of the shell? First, it will check the command is proper or not. Second, what it will do? It will check whether that command is being executed by the normal user or the super user. Super user means administrator. So we have different types of shell, but what is the default shell we will use as in Linux? It is the name of the shell, /bin/bash. So this is the name of the shell which we are using in Linux. So what happens whenever we execute any command in Linux? Whenever we execute any commands, what happens? First, we have to write the command on the shell. So this shell we will get once we open the terminal. So once we open the terminal, then on the terminal, what you will find? The shell. The terminal contain what? Shell. So shell acts like a go-between, accepting the command, whether you have given the command correctly or not. So whatever command you have written as a user, you will write it in what? Human readable language. So the machine never understand human readable language. The machine understand binary language. So once we have opened the terminal and write the command as a user, so first the shell will check whether the command is given by which user, normal user or administrator. After that, most of the commands will not be run by a user. So if the user is not able to use that command, you will get a message, access denied or permission denied. So if a command is executed by, if the command is executed by the uh, super user, then that command will be, most of the command will be executed, or all the commands can be executed by administrator. Only few commands can be executed by the user. So if the user is executing the command which has been permitted under the OS, so then the command will be checked by the shell whether that command is correct or not. If it is not correct, it will say command not found. If it is correct, then what happens? Whether it is given the command by the user or the administrator, if it is correct, then it will be converted into binary. Who will convert this? The shell. So the shell will convert whatever commands we are writing in human readable language by the user. It will convert that into the binary language, because machine understand only binary language. So once it is converted into binary language by the shell, now it will go to the kernel. So where the now our command will go? It will go to the kernel, Linux kernel. But in which format it will go? We will give the command in human readable format on shell. Shell, after finding that command is correct or not and who has given that, should be executed or not. If it is to be executed, it will go to the kernel. If it is not to be executed, it will inform command not found. Then it will change into binary and it will go to the kernel. Now the kernel will check. Now kernel is the interface between the shell and the hardware. So here you can see the diagram of the structure of Linux. So here application means it is your software, and this is Linux kernel. Inside this, what you will have? Hardware. Machine consists of hardware and software. So it will be something like this. So first the machine consists of hardware. On this hardware you will find the Linux kernel. Once we install the Linux, kernel will be there. On top of that you have what? the shell. On the top of that, the software. Machine consists of what? Hardware and the software. Then as a user you are sitting. So once you install the OS, Linux OS consists of the Linux operating system is divided into two layers. First layer shell and the second layer kernel. So what the shell will do, just now we have discussed. So what the shell will do? So shell is first it will check the command is given proper or not and who has given that command. If it is proper, it will convert that command from the human readable format into binary and it will send to the kernel. Now kernel is the interface between the shell and the hardware. So where the kernel is present, you can see here. Kernel is present between the hardware and this. See, kernel is present here, Linux kernel. So Linux kernel is the interface between hardware and the shell. Shell is the interface between the kernel and the software, like that. Now the main part of the Linux operating system is kernel. So kernel is called the core or the brain or the heart of the operating system. So kernel will directly communicate with the hardware. So every operating system will have kernel, but in Linux we have, apart from kernel, the shell extra security. So kernel is basically a bridge between the user and the various resources which is offered by the system. So now once it take the command, now what is the work of the kernel? So it is something like a brain. So in the our body, what is the brain work will do? So whatever task you are doing, in whatever the task as a human being we are doing, so our body consists of various organs. So each and every organ will do some specific task, but who will control all our tasks? So which task should be done by which particular part of the body will be decided, controlled and managed by whom? Brain. So when you are walking, are you walking with your hand? No, with your legs. So who will tell you all these things? For a normal person, it's appear, oh, what a laughing thing. But if you see some people who are not having the normal brain, abnormal brain, which we call them as a math, these are the different things they'll do because their brain is not normal, sitting quietly, uh, speaking properly, or asking proper thing, or sitting properly. All this thing for them is a big task. But the God to whom the people, the God who has blessed the people with a normal brain, so they will not understand the importance of the having the normal brains unless until we see some people who are having abnormal brain. So that's what for normal people it appears very simple task, but this is all things will done by our brain control. Which task should be done by which particular organ at what time? So those all things is controlled by our brain. So same way, which particular task should be done by which particular hardware? So once the command is given, which particular hardware and software should do which particular task? Who will control and manage all these tasks? Kernel. Kernel will not do, but the task will be done by the machine. But which task should be done by which part of the hardware or which software, that will be decided and controlled and managed by kernel. Just like in our case, in our body, which task should be done by which organ, it will be decided by our kernel, sorry, by our brain. I hope you are following. Yes, are you understanding? Yes, both of you, Aruna and so. If you are not understanding any point, you can write in the chat box so that I can repeat. Okay, fine. So up to now, have you understood, both of you, Aruna and Sol? Okay, fine. So now, did you understood? So actually what happens in Linux, whenever we want to do any task, we have to write the command. Where we will write the command? So for that, we have to open the terminal. Once we open the terminal, on the terminal, what you'll have? The shell. What is the role of the shell? First of all, it will check which user is using that command, and that command is proper or not. Once it is proper, it will convert that into binary and it will send to the kernel. Now kernel is the core or the brain of the operating system, so it will decide which this task should be done by which particular hardware and software. So once the task is done by the machine, that is the hardware and the software, kernel will not do the work. It will be done by the system control. So now the output will be available to the kernel in which format? Binary. So as a user, as a person, can we understand the output in binary form? No. So again, the kernel will send the output to the shell. So now what the shell will do when it takes the input? When it takes the input was in the task or the command which you have written as a user. The input was in high level format. So what it will do, when the input is given in high level language, it will convert the input from high level language to binary and it will send to the kernel. The kernel will decide this task should be done by which part of the machine. Once the task is done, the output is available to the kernel. Now the kernel will send the output again, which is in binary form, to the shell. Now what the shell will do, when the output comes in binary form, it converted into human readable form and displays to the monitor. So this is what actual works happens through the Linux kernel and shell internally whenever we are doing any task. So this happens in a fraction of second. Like when you are walking, do you ask everybody what is your name on the road? No. So because your brain will tell. If somebody unknown persons ask you what is your name, will you tell? No, you will not tell. But if your known person comes, if he greets, if he or she greets you, you also greet. So immediately everything will happen in a fraction of second. Same way, this all task will be done within a fraction of second. So once you write the command, press enter. So it will not take even 1 second. In fraction of second, you will get the output. But all this process will take place. First, it will get converted into the binary. Then it will go to the kernel. Kernel will send it to the required uh, hardware and software. The output will come. That will come to the kernel. Kernel will send it to the shell. Shell will convert it back to the human readable format. So shell is the security level between the user and the kernel. So shell will not allow the unknown commands. So why Linux is more secure? So shell will not allow unknown commands and unknown programs to run. Like suppose somebody has sent some virus. So when you're working through the command mode, the virus cannot enter, because once you try to enter it, if it is unknown commands, the program is not predefined by the developer, that command will be unknown. So it cannot execute. So it cannot run and it cannot execute. So shell is a something like a security level. So when any program is sent by some hackers or somebody with bad intention to your machine, that program will not run, because the Linux will not have execute permission and it will check that command is from the predefined. So if it is found that command unknown, it will not run. So most of the operating system, including Windows, will not have the shell. They will have only they will have what? Kernel. So Windows identify the file with the help of the another issue in the Windows. It identifies the file with the extension name. Like if it is a executable file, the file will be ending with .exe. If it is a database file, the file will be ending with a .dat. Dat means database file. If the file is ending with MP3, means it is a media file. For batch file, the extension will be .bat. But in Linux, for the file, we will not have any extension. So in Linux, the files are identified with the help of here file is identified with the help of symbols and alphabets. So here also we have different types of file, but here these different types of files here is not identified by extension. Here it is identified by symbols and alphabet. Like for normal file, when we start the practical, I'll show you the first character for normal file will be hyphen. So here normal file in Windows will be dot what? Normal file will have what extension in Windows? if you create any file in Windows, you will have what extension? .exe or executable file, and for normal text file the extension will be .txt, but in Linux you will not have extension. Here you will have, the first character hyphen means it is a normal file, whether it is a text file or normal file, first character will be hyphen. For hidden file, the first character will be dot. So dot means what? Hidden files. So here dot indicate hidden files. And if the first extension is B, means it is a block file. And in Linux we have two types of link files. So if it is a soft link or hard link, how to identify, we'll be discussing that also. So if it is a soft link file, the first letter will be L. So normal file, symbol or alphabet will be hyphen. Hidden file dot, block file B, link file L, first character. If it is a socket file, the first character will be S. And if it is a directory, the first character will be D. And if it is a piped file, then first character will be P. So like this. If it is a special character file, then the first character will be C. So from this, what you have to understand, here in Linux the files are not having any extension. In Windows the files are identified with extension, whereas in Linux the files are identified with the symbols and alphabet. Okay, like these are the alphabet, these are the symbols. And in Linux the file default don't have the execute permission, so file will not get run because it doesn't have the execute permission. Okay, so as I told you, Linux is a foundation class for doing any higher courses, like whether you are doing AWS, DevOps, VMware, Oracle, Hadoop, SAP. So this is the course. So I'll be sending you this file, don't worry. So now today we have discussed what, why Linux has been preferred to be used in the servers. So this is not only the reason, this is one of the reason. The structure of the Linux OS is very secure. Why it is secure? Because of the shell. So extra we have shell here. So what is the role of the shell we have discussed? What is the kernel we have discussed? And the files will be not having any execute permission. So normally the file will not get run in the Linux. And when anything is being given, whether that is correct or not, it will check. Who will check it in Linux? The command is given properly or not, it will be checked. By whom it will check? The shell will check. So apart from that, the Linux OS can be installed on multiple partition, which cannot be done in Windows. So due to that, in Windows it is easy to operate, but if one of the partition get corrupted, one of the OS folder get corrupted, the entire OS will get corrupted or affected in Windows. But in Linux, if one of the file system get, or one of the folder or the OS folder get corrupted, it will not affect the OS, because the Linux OS will be installed on multiple partition. So the Linux OS will be installed on multiple partition. So where exactly what data will be stored in Linux, so that we can understand with the help of the file system. So that is nothing but structure of the Linux OS, where exactly what data will be stored. So that is called file system hierarchy standard. So by that we can able to know where exactly what data will be stored in the Linux. So once we understand this, then we can able to operate the Linux. So first we have to know the structure of the Linux OS, where exactly what data will be stored. So this is the structure of the Linux. So in Linux, where the Linux OS will get installed on the slash, which is a directory, whereas the Windows OS will get installed where on the drive. So in Linux we don't have any drive. So suppose this is your machine. In this machine you have installed, so suppose, Windows operating system. This is the machine in which you have installed Windows operating system. So this Windows operating system in your machine get installed where? In the hard disk. So in the hard disk, where exactly this Windows operating system will get installed? So Windows OS will get installed on the C drive. C drive contain Windows OS in Windows. Then the C drive contain some important folder. The C drive contains some important folder. Like one of the important folder is Windows. One of the important folder is Windows. So inside this Windows folder, we have subfolders like System32, drivers, log files, then etc. So like these subfolders will be there. Then another main folder there in the C drive is program file. One folder is Windows, in which it contains the Windows operating system related data like System32, drivers, log file, etc, temporary file, so like that. Then next important folder is program file. So program files contain what? Program file contain all installed application. So in Windows, all the application will be .exe. So whenever we install any application, where it will be stored? In Windows, where exactly the application will be stored? In program file. Then now we are having one folder with the name called users. So where all users data will be stored. So under that users folder, there will be one folder with the name administrator. There is a folder called administrator. So this administrator folder contain administrator. The name of the administrator in Windows is administrator. So administrator created data will be stored in administrator folder under users folder. C drive, users folder, administrator contain administrator data. Now suppose you have created some user U1. So for U1, one folder will be created under the user folder, subfolder. For user2 folder will be created with the name, user's name. So it contains user1 data in the user1 folder. User2 data will be there in user2 folder. For each and every user with their name, one folder will be created. So here the advantage in Windows is it is easy to operate, but disadvantage, if one of the folder get corrupted, get affected with virus or anything, it will affect first this folder, then this users folder get corrupted, then everything is on a single partition. So ultimately the entire OS will get affected. So this is the drawback in the Windows. So these are the three main important reasons why most of the servers are using on Linux. First, so uh, most of the servers in the world are working on Linux for three reasons. First reason, Linux is more secure. Linux is more secure. So why most of the servers are working on Linux? Because Linux is more secure compared to Windows. Because of first thing, because of shell. First important point. Second point, in Windows, all the files will have execute permission, but in Linux, the files will not have execute permission. So any unknown program will not run. So Linux program will not run unless until it is a program which you know, or which program. So here in the Linux, unknown programs will not run. In Linux, unknown programs will not run because it will not have execute permission, will not run. And the third one, the structure, the Linux OS can be installed on multiple partition, can be installed on multiple partition, which you cannot do in Windows. So in Windows, the OS completely get installed on single partition drive. So if one of the OS folder get corrupted, entire OS will get affected. But in Linux, the Linux OS can be installed on multiple partitions. So in Linux OS, if one of the partition get affected, so that partition, okay. So Linux OS can be installed on multiple partitions. Linux OS can be installed on multiple partitions. So if one of the folder in Linux get corrupted, so that folder belong to which partition, that only will get affected, not entire OS. So these are the some of the important reasons why most of the companies prefer to use the secure and stable OS, that is the Linux, on their servers. Okay, so now tomorrow we will see exactly where what data will be stored. So once you understand that, then you can operate the Linux operating system. So tomorrow we'll see the structure of the Linux OS. If time is there, we will see the installation also tomorrow. Otherwise, the practical will start from day after tomorrow. Okay. So see, this is the overall structure. So in Linux, there is no drive letter. Everything will work through the directory here. So that we will see tomorrow. So did you understood both of you whatever we have discussed today, Aruna and Sol? Okay. So tomorrow at what time we should have? 9:30 or 10? Yes, tell me. 9:30 or 10 o'clock. Some people yesterday they told 10 o'clock, but they most of them they are not logging today. Why I don't know. For you 9:30 is better. Okay. So we'll see tomorrow. So you want me to start 9:30? Okay, then okay, then we'll start by 9:30, means 9:30, 30 maximum 9:40. I'll start. Okay, I will log in by 9:30, 35. Let's start by 9:40. Okay. I'll send you once we get the confirmation who has joined and made the payment to them. Okay. I'll send you all the three. So have you made the payment, Aruna and Sol? Okay. So you have made it. Okay. So Aruna, when you will be making the payment? So as soon as you make a payment, you tell me so that I can send you the meeting. So when you will be paying, Aruna? Okay, as soon as possible from your end, please do it. And once you are done it, tell me, both of you tell me. So you wait one day, tomorrow I'll send you. Okay, all these 3 files I'll send you. Okay, so do you have any questions or any doubt before I wind up the session? Do you have any questions or any doubt regarding today's session? Okay, so then can I close the session? So can I close the session? Okay. Yes, Aruna, from your end, any questions, any doubt? Okay. Okay, so see you tomorrow. Thank you. I'll start from 9:30, 9:45 like. Okay. So I'm closing the session. Okay, see you tomorrow. Thank you all of both of you. See you tomorrow. I'm closing the session.